Penang, the Pearl of the Orient. Known by many for its delicious foods, culture-rich heritage sites, and unhinged drivers and riders. However, not many realize that this little island of ours hides a secret. One that can be gleaned from the fact that Jalan Zainal Abidin used to be known as Jalan Yahudi. That this little island is where we can find traces of the lost Jews of Penang. In the dawn of the 1800s in Georgetown, Penang, the British-governed Freeport immediately found itself to be a thriving destination for sailors all over the world, thanks to the promise of free trade without any tax or duties. And this was great for the up-and-coming port town because it brought in so much trade and different cultures in one spot. And one of these cultures was the Jewish community, as evidenced by the construction of the Jewish cemetery in 1805. The cemetery was given to the Jewish community by an Englishwoman of Jewish descent, Mrs. Shoshan Levi, who had acquired the land as a token of gratitude for her recovery from a dire illness. During the same time frame, the Jews of Baghdad were being cruelly persecuted by its then governor, the Mamluk Daud Pasha. This prompted a mass exodus of Baghdadi Jews from Persia to Calcutta, India. Despite their refugee status, they managed to establish themselves as rich merchants of the community, forming trading families such as the Sassoons and the Maya family. However, life in this new land still wasn't as great. And so the descendants of these families began searching for better prospects, a safer haven that they could call home. It was then that they heard of a small island colony in Southeast Asia, a small island called Penang. Although the Jewish community grew from the influx of Baghdadi Jews, the community remained very small, with a rough populations within the hundreds. Despite this, they quickly established themselves within the port town, functioning as a middleman between the running elite and the lower class, serving as moneylenders, tailors, and petition writers. And due to their growing community, they converted a shop house into Penang's very first synagogue, where the community would meet together every Saturday for prayers. This tranquility would ultimately end by the advent of World War II, as the Japanese forces began their invasion of the Federation of Malaya. Due to the Japanese and their alliance with Nazi Germany, the British deemed it necessary to evacuate Jewish families from Penang to Singapore, leaving Penang for the Japanese to take over. Thank you, British overlords, for leaving behind oil refineries, several small aircrafts, and the Penang radio station in full working order for the Japanese invasion force to use. However, as the war continues, the Japanese forces began to make their way down to Malaya. Being confronted with the imminent danger of capture or death, most of the remaining Jews eventually fled the Japanese by migrating to Australia via the East Dutch Indies. But after living so long in Malaya, there were still those who called this land home. And so, the few remaining members of the Jewish community decided to stay behind. That is until as World War II draws to a close, many Jews return to Jalan Yahudi. However, with the shortage of jobs, an uncertain future, and the diminishing pool of eligible spouses, many Penang Jews began to migrate out, ultimately leaving only 3 families left in all of Penang. On the morning of 1969, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict rages on, following the firebombing of Al-Aqsa Mosque by Israeli terrorists. Then Prime Minister Tun Abdul Razak voiced Malaysia's unwavering support towards the Palestinians. This culminated in the growing anti-Semitic sentiment in Malaysia, which in turn led to even more Penang Jews to emigrate. The rapidly declining population resulted in the community's inability to hold a sustainable congregation. Couple this with the weakened religious grounding within the younger generations, this ended up being the final nail in the coffin for the Penang Jews, and ultimately in 1976, the synagogue closed down, marking the death of the Jewish community in Penang. In the end, very few evidence of the Jewish community is left. Jalan Yahudi was renamed to Jalan Zainal Abidin after Zainul Abidin bin Sultan Maidin, one of Penang's pioneer educationists. The building that was once the synagogue remains standing, but is currently being used by a quaint little cafe you can still visit today. Malaysia's last local Jew, Mr. Mordecai David Mordecai, passed away in the year 2011, leaving the Jewish cemetery being the only evidence left. The story of the Penang Jews is an open secret. However, as the years go by, some can't help but feel that sooner or later, any evidence of this once living community will soon disappear from the minds of Malaysians.